So I'm Raul Gutierrez. I am the founder and CEO of Tinybop. Online, we're Tinybop, and I'm the Mexican. I am Mexican. We, like all of you, make apps for kids, and this talk is about how we make our apps. And for those of you who don't know us, I'm going to give you a little introduction. Before we even started the company, we had a plan for building apps in series. Our first series is called the Explorer's Library. Our second one's called Digital Toys, and the third one we're still working on. So we planned this out before we did anything with the company, and now it's coming together a bit. And last year, Kika from our company talked about some of the apps that we're creating, and so this year we're going to kind of go through them and let you know how it came out. So our first series is called the Explorer's Library. All the apps in this series are lushly illustrated, and they all cover big subjects that we think are evergreen and that kids everywhere need to know about. They were inspired. I was a science geek when I was a kid, and these apps were inspired by the things that inspired me: school instructional posters, children's encyclopedias, classroom models. There are a lot of things that kids nowadays don't really get in the same way that I did when I was a kid, and so we're trying to make the modern form of these. The goal with these apps is not so much to answer questions, but to spark them. So we have 4 apps in this series. The final one here, Simple Machines, is actually being launched today. And we have a couple more coming out this year. Each app in this series is the product of extensive research, and the result is not really a game, but what we call a quiet simulation that allows kids to free play as they explore the subject. If there's a general formula for this series, it's that we choose a subject that we think is universal. We create this simulation where the learning is embedded in the interaction as opposed to being didactic. So, for example, in the skeleton, when we're teaching the skeleton, like, what does a kid need to know about the skeleton that holds the body up? So instead of telling a kid that, if they remove the bones, the whole body collapses. Also, additionally, we help parents and teachers by creating supplemental materials that they can download for free. We call them handbooks. And the output of this series, we hope, is the set of questions a kid asks about the subject. We think that real learning happens when kids engage in conversation with parents and teachers. And so we know that we can't teach everything about the body in an app, but we want to start that conversation to get a kid interested. We had a great 1-star review the other day from this woman who wrote in the App Store, my kid plays the Human Body app all the time, and every time she plays it, she's full of questions. And she was annoyed by the fact that her kid was full of questions. And I want to say, lady, that's the point. Our second series is called Digital Toys, and this series we think of them as construction kits that help kids give form to their imaginations, and then to bring the things that they build to life. So the first app in the series is called the Robot Factory. It just came out. And the formula with this series is that we set up a context. We let kids build without a lot of restriction, without there being a right way or a wrong way to build. And then the hat trick here is that we make that thing that they build come to life. So in this first app, we generally start with like paper, and kids are creating things with paper. What we found is kids didn't want the arms to go where arms go, or legs to go where legs go. They just wanted to build it however they wanted. Maybe they wanted to build a robot that had no head. It just was a bunch of arms all the way around. And then we used all the physics-based stuff to make that feel real. And the output here is not the actual robot, but the story the kid tells about the robot. And that's how we knew we were kind of doing our jobs, is when kids had these elaborate stories that had nothing to do with what we had on the page. So a little bit about our thought process. I started Tinybop sort of in like 2009, 2010. I was looking for a new project. I've done a bunch of things in my life. I knew I wanted to be in mobile, but I was looking at all sorts of other ideas. None of them had to do with kid stuff. And in the middle of that process, my oldest kid had just turned 6, and he asked me if he could trade his birthday party, his like kindergarten birthday party, for an iPhone. And if you know anything about 6-year-olds, you know like that birthday party is like it's the most important thing in the world. It's the currency they use when they're angry at other kids. You know, they say, "You're not coming to my birthday party." So it made me like really stop. Like that moment was like the moment that really made me stop, and for me, it made me realize that the phone wasn't just a powerful toy. It was like his favorite toy. It was his everything. And I really asked myself why this happened. And it was because it was an everything machine. The iPhone, it can be a tool, it can be a camera, it can be a voice recorder, it can be passive entertainment, it can be a game, it can be a friend. Like, have you ever seen like a little kid talk to Siri? It's hysterical. And they're intimate. Like if you watch kids when they're playing with these devices, they curl up, they go off into corners. One of my little cousins in Mexico refers to the way he touches the screen as rascando un gato, which means like rubbing a cat. And it's sort of like that. So then, like, I had kind of a difficult relationship with kids and screen time because I was always annoyed with screen time, and I asked myself, if he loves this thing, why am I so annoyed that my kid is on this device? And I got systematic about looking at what my kid was consuming, and especially sort of in 2009, 2010, the reason I was annoyed was because a lot of the content that he was consuming, especially educational content, was terrible. Like, and there was a lot of artwork was like barely better than clip art. Many of the apps were designed by solo engineers, you know, and they looked like it. They were full of ads, and they covered a very narrow range of subjects. And then you had big companies that were just creating like marketing for some bigger entity. Also, it was a medium that designers weren't really designing properly for. They weren't really designing for touch. And so I think to compensate, a lot of apps, especially in that time, were visually and sonically very loud. They never gave kids a space to think or relax. And any parent who has a kid that's played some of these sort of badly designed apps knows that at the end of them, their kids are like kind of these overstimulated little zombies, and they're bad-tempered. And the more I thought about this, it seemed to me to be an opportunity. I was looking for experiences that were more like this. Like this is my kid playing with blocks, and we said, you know, build a zoo. And then, you know, for hours they're building a zoo. That's the kind of experience we thought we could replicate. So we created a recipe, basically, and I'm a big believer that the best creative projects come out of limitations. And, you know, if you look at the Empire State Building or the Chrysler Building, like two of the most beautiful buildings in New York, their form is dictated by the building codes of the time. There were a set of limitations that were placed on the designers of those buildings, and they had to sort of build within that framework. And, you know, if you look at Mac Paint, the paint window is 416 pixels wide. It's 416 pixels wide because those early Macs had, there were 32-bit machines, and they had 13 registers. So 13 times 32 bits is 416 pixels wide, which allowed Bill Atkinson, the guy who created this, to create an undo and accurately do it. So his limitation was the actual form of the machine, and he managed, working within that space, to create something beautiful. So we create, at Tinybop, we create rubrics for ourselves. And this is just one of the rubrics we use. One of the first things that we did is we decided not to use background music in our apps. This came out of a discovery we made while we were creating the human body. And one of our original ideas was that like each system of the body would have like a different soundtrack. So the heartbeat would be drums, and the breathing, I forget what that was, but the nervous system was violins, and you'd sort of put them all together and be like this little symphony. And what we found is that the tempo of the music dictated how the kids were playing with the app, and that when we shut it off, that kids would be more engaged and would actually play longer. And so while our apps are musical and there's a lot of music in them, we use the music environmentally, or we have sounds that are environmental. It's sort of like, if you know anything about Dogma films, they do the same thing. But we're not scared of silence either. I think, if you're doing story apps, it's like a whole different story and you need music. But for our apps and what we're trying to do, this sort of quiet exploration, music was wrong for us. And what we really aspired to is Myst. Like, if any of you are old enough to remember this game, it was like this great, quiet, mysterious world that you could just sort of wander around in. The second thing is that we work with great artists. I always like doing this experiment. I ask everybody to sort of close your eyes and remember your favorite picture book. Can you remember the cover? Can you remember your favorite illustration? This, for me, was my favorite picture book. I can remember every page of this book. And if the work that we're going to do is going to stand the test of time, if it's going to be meaningful to kids, it's not just about engineering challenges, but we have to create images and experiences that are powerful enough to invade a kid's memory. And too many apps today, I think, are disposable and just marketing. At Sandbox Summit a month or two ago, a woman told me that her company releases 2 apps a week. And like, what are the odds that any of those have any meaning? Most of us here create apps for kids who are between 3 and 10. And if you think back about your life, like how much of your life of who you are now was formed during that time? For me, it was a lot. My parents got me my first Apple II when I was 9 years old. And writing software for it allowed me to like escape the little Texas town that I grew up in. And I think the software that we create can be an escape for kids. It can help form the things that they're interested in. Number 3, reveal yourself slowly. We do extensive play testing, but one of the problems with play testing is that a lot of times when you're sitting there watching kids playing, you're expecting them to discover everything really quickly. And the truth is, if you want your app to sort of have a long life, you don't want everything to be discovered right away. So my best test of our app are over time with my kids or their friends' kids. And do they pick it up after a week or after a month? Like, don't give everything away all at once. And this is especially hard, I think, with humor. A lot of times with humor, you really have to hide things, and so that they won't be discovered after. I think in one of our apps we have something it's not triggered until the 200th time that you use it, and it works. Add a touch of danger. Kids, especially like American kids, lead like these very circumscribed lives. Their physical lives have been circumscribed, and so and parents control their digital lives too, and they're given very little opportunity to experience being put off balance. And again, do you remember your favorite children's book? Like, I'll bet many of them had some element of danger or strangeness to them. So in our apps, bodies vomit, they eat too much, like forests catch on fire, and robots fail very badly. I think it's important to leave kids with questions and not to try to answer everything. Too many children's apps, especially educational apps, they try to answer too much. And that's no fun. And so I think part of what we do with Tinybop and the whole sort of Explorers Library idea was based on this thing I do with my kids every night called question time. So every night before my kids go to bed, even when I'm traveling, I do it remotely, we have an open forum. They can ask me any question, I can ask them any question. It's like the best part of my day. And I think of the Explorers Library as sort of kindling for those kind of questions. And it's actually like some of the most profound questions about life and death have actually been inspired by our own apps, and my kids, more than anybody, like should be sick of these things. So it seems to work. I think in order for a kids app to really be special, they have to be engineered for delight, and you have to sweat the details. Again, I always look back to children's books for inspiration. Like if you're a Richard Scarry fan and you know this book, you know that kids love Goldbug. So every page of this book, there's this little gold bug. I think he's in the bus somewhere on this page. But kids will go through this book and they look for Goldbug on every page. It's this tiny little detail, but it's like this second storyline that goes through it. And this is kind of what we aspire to. Another thing in books that shows, I think, attention to detail are great end pages. These are the end pages for My Father's Dragon, and when I was a kid, I used to live in this kind of map. There's another great one, this book that has this giant snowball fight at the end. And for us, Engineering for Delight is all about using physics-based animations that are, they're not just animations that are running in a loop. They're responding to how kids touch the app, and even the sound. Like in the Robots app, we attached sounds to all the joints, and we connected that to physics, so it looks and it feels real. If you have eyes, the eyes follow you around. That's the kind of stuff that I think brings kids back. For every app that we do, we create a mood board, and I think having great inspirations is really a powerful way to sort of telegraph things that you've already felt or that were important to you. This was an image that was over my abuelita's bed when I was a kid, and I think it directly inspired our human body app. It used to freak me out, and yet I loved it. This was a book image, again, that directly inspired the human body. These were the kind of images that inspired our Plants app. This was homes. My kids love to play robots, and so this is sort of one of the inspirations for the robot app, as were old toys and like awesome pictures of like robots building other robots, and Strondabeast, if you know these are kind of awesome too. Number 8, go native, and by that we mean like use the device. This is Bill Budge's pinball construction set from like the Stone Ages of the computer world, and it was this great little app where you could kind of build your own pinball machine. And it took the Apple II, which was a very sort of primitive device, and it used every single thing that the Apple II had in it. And our phones and tablets, they're not just screens anymore. They have cameras and accelerometers and vibration motors and all sorts of cool things. And if we use that, we can really bring our apps to life. And then I can't stress enough like how important it is to observe kids over time and to ask them questions. Give a kid your app on an iPad that's full of every popular, awesome app on there, and see if they'll play with yours, see if they'll pick yours. Watch them in a car ride, watch them when they're with friends. Are they going to pick it up? Are they going to click on your icon like compared to all the other icons on the screen? Kids play very differently than adults, and in artificial playtest scenarios, like you often don't get the same feedback that you do, at a house or birthday party. So observe in different environments, and also, it's like most importantly, I think, is to find out or try to find out what kids are seeing and experiencing emotionally, and respecting those feelings and emotions, because we forget how big and mysterious the world is for a little kid. Play is serious business for them. This is my kid, and he was sort of exploring the jungle. And we were just like in a little lake in New Jersey, but I mean, for him, this was like a serious thing. And finally, for the recipe part of it, put yourself in the proper place. There are too many brands that put themselves in the center of the narrative. And the output of their play is a brand narrative. I love Legos, but like modern Legos are sold as kits. They're disassembled toys and they lead to a single endpoint. And then when they're done, they stick it on a shelf and they want to buy another one. The output's not something that lives in the child's imagination, but like it's something that was created by a play designer at the Lego factory. So ask yourself, do children have an opportunity to create their own narratives with your content? Does your content spark ideas? Does it give them space? So I think this is the proper way to think of it. We respect kids and we respect parents, but we're kind of outside that. So I'm going to quickly go. I'm sure we're running out of time, but the making of our various apps. So I don't think I've ever shown this slide before. These are sort of our original icons when we were sort of designing the brand. This is how we first imagined them. We started with a brand book. It was the very first thing that we did. We imagined all of our icons. We imagined sort of the startup screens. We imagined splash screens. We imagined our brand as products also. And that's guided us throughout. So the first app we did was the human body. I think Kika probably talked to you guys about that last year. That came out in August 2013. It was really the product of all these sort of inspirations, these sort of science-y kind of inspirations that we had. And then we really tried to turn it into something modern. That when you feed our human body, the little bits of food look like emoji. All that stuff was on purpose. We wanted it to feel like it was of today. And then we used the device. Our eyeball flips the image and puts it in the back of the eye, and it responds properly to bright and darkness so that the pupil contracts. And we never have to say anything. It just does it the way it's supposed to do it. And this app has been, it was a great first app. It was App of the Year the year it came out, and has sort of guided us ever since. Plants was our second app. This app was, the original idea for this app was we wanted to create like a little diorama, like a diorama of a forest, and we wanted to have a kid to be able to move the sun and the moon to control time, and we wanted to burn it down. So like our first artwork was all about this sort of forest burning down and regrowing. And this is an app that like continues to confound adults, but I tell you that the people who do discover it, we get these amazing emails from parents that said, my kid was just on a plane for 3 hours or 4 hours, and they spent the entire time playing with your little forest. It's this very elaborate simulation of a forest world. You can control time. You can go from summer to winter to fall. We have a couple of environments, a desert. And it's a very, very slow app, maybe probably too slow for some parents, but kids seem to get it. And a lot of times, like sort of a kid who's played Minecraft a lot and is used to a very different pace will come to this app and they won't know what to do with it, and they'll just sort of put it down. But then they come back to it, and we hear that over and over again from parents of, we got this app, we didn't really kind of know what it was about, but then, our kid just like dove in, and now he's asking all these great questions, which is what, of course, we love to hear. And we hear that around the world. Like part of our sort of brand philosophy is to be everywhere, and so we're most of our apps are in 40 plus 50 languages. I think the human body's in 60 now. These are some environments that aren't yet in the app, but will be soon. This is the tundra and swamplands. There's alligators. That swamp is full of alligators. So Homes was the next app that we did. It came out in October. This one was very much driven by research, and the idea here was it was inspired by this book called Where Children Sleep, and we wanted to show sort of how kids sleep, how they go to the bathroom, how they eat in a house. And so we chose a couple of houses around the world. We did extensive research on those houses, and then we sort of turned them into our idea of the house. There are no people in this app, which was sort of an interesting decision. We were worried about it at first, that you just have these kind of empty rooms that kids are wandering around in. But they like playing house. They sort of make it messy, they clean it up, they break plates, they can play records. They sort of inhabit the house and imagine themselves in it. And again, this is sort of from a PowerPoint that our researchers put together, and this is how it ends up looking in the app. And every single little thing when you go in this house, there are hundreds of objects. Every single one is based on an actual sort of referenced image. So this is great for schools that are studying cross-cultural ways people live. This is Germany. Germany is not in the app yet, but it will be soon. And you see we have this very kind of idealized German village. The app that we released today is Machines. It's actually now called Simple Machines. And this one, the exploration was of levers, pulleys, wheels, axles. This is something that's taught around the world as kind of an introductory science class. And it can be a very esoteric subject for kids. Our first idea was to sort of create these sort of Rube Goldberg type devices, and we found it was too complicated, that the educational thing that we were trying to show didn't work. So we eventually simplified it down to these sort of single scenes. This is the wedge. Actually, turns out that some of the physics was wrong here, so we couldn't use a wedge like this. It had to go down. But we do sort of a lot of exploration. We come up with color palettes, et cetera, and eventually we got to these scenes. And since it's a brand new app and none of you have seen it, I'll play a quick little video. And the music's only for the promo. I've been told that my time's up, but I have one more app. The Robot Factory came out last month. It was a new series, so we had to do sort of a lot of brand exploration to kind of make sure that it all matched. This app is about this sort of series of parts that you put together to create these robot scenes. I'll see if I can trigger these here. So part of the hard part was getting the robots to walk correctly with physics in a way that was satisfying to the kids. So you can see we had many failures before we got to someplace good. This is how it all ended up. Another funny thing about this app is that somebody in China, if you know the app market there, has like this panda hegemony. And so some of our Chinese fans told us that our robot was actually a secret panda, which we had never seen, but it sort of, it worked out. Since it was released last month, this was as of last night, 1,300,080 robots have been built. And I think the danger when you get these big numbers is that you stop looking at kids as individuals David Byrne, I once had a lunch with David Byrne. He said that he quit the talking heads when he looked out at the audience and they were just texture as opposed to individuals. And we always try to look at kids as individuals. And do I have 2 more minutes? So just to show kind of the way kids react to this, the next little video is a bunch of kids who were playing with an early prototype of robots, and then we just asked them for their stories. We didn't prompt them. We just put them in front of a backdrop and asked them about robots, the ones they built.
Robots, I am really into them. I built a lot of them.
My robot is not a city robot.
In her brain, she has some type of GPS that'll say, now you're in China or something.
I think he goes to the Robo Mall. He's funny. He's smart. He can party a lot at night.
Evil robots are the only type of robots I actually built.
Well, he does make robotic noises like this.
He's sinister. Yeah, he's evil.
That is Helicopter Guy. He actually try to fly, help you get some wind on you if you're really, really hot.
He's a mad scientist, so he's really creepy. He doesn't go to bed.
Robots don't have emotions, unless it was an emotion robot.
My robot's name is Diamond. She usually thinks about going to the bathroom because I go to the bathroom a lot, so I kind of think she thinks more about what her body's telling her, okay, I need to go to the bathroom.
Chainsaw Master is a good robot. If you call, he has his own company with and he cuts wood for you.
He doesn't have a mouth.
Tearing apart towns, that's basically what he does. But if he gets lucky, he can rip maybe a whole city.
Yes, I gave it 5 legs. Because real spiders have probably more than 5 legs.
What is he thinking of? I forgot to give him a brain.
The Robot Factory by Tinybop.
Oop.
So that's it. Thank you very much.